joining us here on Following the Gong. I'm excited to welcome in personal finance authority, best-selling author, and one of America's go-to money experts, Farnoosh Torabi, class of 2002. We're recording this here at the Business Building, home to the Smeal College of Business, with a live audience of students and faculty. We are really happy to have you back here on campus to receive the Penn State Alumni Association Alumni Fellow Award. Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, I always like to ground these conversations, and hopefully you appreciate this as a journalist, by having guests give a bit of relatable backstory. So can you share how you ended up here at Penn State and as a Schreyer Scholar?
Kicking and screaming. No, is that relatable enough? I was a resident of Pennsylvania, living in the suburbs of Philadelphia, a very ambitious young girl in high school, and Penn State was sort of like the obvious choice that I hadn't really considered. I think because I was so mystified by some of the Ivy Leagues and brand name schools, and much to my dismay, because I think had I gone that route, I would have graduated heavily in debt and maybe not have discovered who I am as much as I did at Penn State. And of course, meeting my husband here. So it all worked out. And I landed here. Really, it was a no-brainer once I did get into the Schreyer Honors College as well. So getting into main campus is a huge deal. It's a huge accomplishment. And then on top of that, to get the opportunity to work with really motivated, extra motivated students, get smaller class sizes. And there was this, I got a letter that said, starting this fall or this winter, we'll be doing our inaugural trip to London, where you can apply to basically learn theater and go to 11 different shows. And I thought, well, if nothing else, this is happening, I'm signing up for that program. And I did. So immediately upon getting to campus, within a few months, I was on a flight to Europe, thanks to the Schreyer Honors Program and the amazing programming that they have for their students. So that's the short story. I think hopefully the relatable part is that sometimes you take a leap of faith and you do something that you don't have all the answers to, but if you come tonight or you watch our live stream of the awards tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about that in my acceptance speech, just how, the importance of just staying curious. And if you're at Penn State, you're in good hands, because here you have the resources, we have the relationships that you'll forge to just change the rest of your life for the better.
Absolutely. And want to give a shout out, I think Tim is in the back of the room, right?
Yes, he is. I told him, I said, go, because we don't, we came to campus a month ago, but it's not often that we come twice in a year. I said, please go and explore. He said, nope, I want to be here fact checking. I want to stay, so.
Well, I'm sure as a journalist you appreciate that, but you obviously were here at Smeal, not at a Bellisario facility, so how did you end up picking finance as your major?
Well, it was not the first choice. I think that, again, what you'll learn about me is I have a lot of interests, and I've kind of created a career that has amalgamated a lot of interests. But at college, picking a lane was very difficult for me, picking a school. And initially I thought, well, maybe I'll be a lawyer, and so I'll study political science because that will make my mother really happy. And then I did not enjoy those classes, and then pivoted to, well, can I do theater? And I'm the daughter of Iranian immigrants. That is not going to fly. And so, okay, that was an immediate no. And then my father actually had a conversation with him. I said, it's getting time to pick out a major. If I delay this any longer, I might have to be in college for, forever. And he said, look, college is an investment. Pick a major where you're going to learn something, and you'll be able to enter the job market and apply yourself. And again, it's that sort of immigrant mentality of just, get a rate of return. And my father's a physicist, so he's very familiar with numbers. He likes a good equation. And I said, okay, well, what could be more of a proven track record, or a degree that I could study that I could start making money pretty quickly, and that was finance. But what I didn't realize at first, what ended up being the reason it was such a great fit for me, was that I didn't see myself represented at the time in the major. And that's my advice to anybody, whether it's at school or at work or in life, is that sometimes we fear being the one, the only, the singular person in that path. We don't see ourselves super represented, but that ended up being the best possible sort of playground for me, because Smeal really wanted to encourage more women to join the college at the time, particularly within the finance department. So me being there, I felt like they kind of rolled out the red carpet. I got a lot of access and opportunities, and I saw that actually with my roommate, who was a mechanical engineering major, and she got a full scholarship, and again, really just was able to leverage so much of the opportunities here. And I think that was a byproduct of being singular in who you are in that field. So that was great. And I think that I took that with me in a lot of the different arenas that I went to later on in college. I mean, even just choosing to be a financial journalist, at the time it was flooded with men. People who give financial advice typically have been and still are men. So that didn't frighten me. It actually really made me excited and more interested in pursuing that.
Awesome. Now, Farnoosh, you mentioned about trying to stay in your lane, right? But obviously, as a Schreyer Scholar, kind of impossible to do that. And our dean, Pat Mather, he always likes to highlight like he's an engineer, but he's a musician.
Yeah.
So you took a similar approach to diversifying your campus involvement. Can you talk about some of the things that you did here on campus that may have influenced your career down the road,
Sure.
whether that's clubs or work opportunities?
I worked at the Daily Collegian in sales. Again, this was early on when I thought that I wanted to pursue a career in business and sales, finance. So that felt natural to me, even though in high school I was the writer. I ran the school paper, and I was very creative and literary and all that. But when I got to college, again, I felt like I had to really, do the more rational and ROI sort of things. So did that. But honestly, that experience, what I had to do at the Collegian was I was in charge of clients around town, business owners, getting them to advertise in our Daily Collegian paper. And that included creating ad campaigns, being really, really creative, but also business savvy, also being putting your fears aside and just walking into business owners and being like, I like to talk to the owner, right? And I'm 18 years old and you should take me seriously. And that was such a learning experience, and it really trained me for the real world. So if anyone gets the chance to do any kind of sales job before they graduate, I would highly recommend it. Then I did a lot of theater while I was here. I played with the No Refund Theater kids. We had a lot of fun, got to direct and star in shows and work on production. That again was a leftover from high school that, okay, well, if I can't major in theater, I'm gonna just explore all the extracurriculars I can around it. I traveled abroad, and I think once I was a sophomore, that was when I sort of had the light bulb that, okay, I don't think I want to actually use my finance degree in the traditional way of working as an analyst or at an investment bank or in business, but that what I really love about the financial markets and the economy is kind of explaining it all, learning it, then explaining it and teaching it, and the storytelling. At the time when I was in college, the business news became front page news because there were all these scandals. There was Enron, there was Tyco, there was the Aaron Brockovich film, right? And so we got to sort of see the behind the scenes of, not the best of the behind the scenes, but it was interesting. It was like sort of sparked your curiosity, and a lot of journalists who broke those stories, we were very grateful for them. So it inspired me to go, is there a way? Like, what if I could continue studying finance, but now that I have this consciousness that I want to sort of maybe be a journalist or a storyteller, or I don't know what, but not somebody who's behind a computer with my finance degree. How can I start to get these experiences now to kind of create the narrative at the end of the day that, like, I had the foresight, I did want this, and I'm going to start to connect some dots for myself. And so when I had that light bulb, I thought, okay, well, I don't want to go into the communications department. I don't want to pivot and then have to delay my graduation. I'm going to finish finance, but I'm going to, along the way, intern at a magazine one summer. I'm going to do my honors thesis with the College of Media and Communications. I'm going to start exploring graduate programs for journalism and what that might take to apply and what are they looking for in candidates, so I can start to reverse engineer some of those things. And when I graduated Penn State, I was able to go right into journalism school because of sort of the seeds that I planted. Again, you have to make a case, right? I didn't know if I was going to be a financial journalist forever, but for right now, this is the story that's going to get me to the next thing. And then when I get to the next thing, I'll figure it out. But I needed a way to kind of get my foot in the door in the journalism world without the degree. And even when I went to journalism school, as a journalist, it's not your degrees that really matter at the end of the day. It's your experience, it's your bylines, it's a trade. And so when I was in journalism school, and I'm now fast forwarding a bit, I wasn't the smartest in the class by any stretch. I wasn't the best writer. But thanks to my sales background, I was the one who was the best pitcher of my ideas to newspapers, to magazines. So by the time I graduated, I had actually published quite a bit with bylines. That's what got me work. Whereas my classmates, who were the star, literary, brightest of minds, they didn't focus on the sort of the business applications of what they were doing, the entrepreneurial requirements of what they were doing to succeed. It's like we talked about before we were recording. It's like when you're an artist or creative, you, for whatever reason, you don't sort of take on the business savvy that's really required, because we always talk about the starving artist, or I'll never get paid, or you don't value your work. You have to be the biggest advocate for your work. Of course, you want to make an impact. So with the training that I had at Penn State, I carried that into my journalism school, and then later on in life as I built my business.
Awesome. So Farnoosh, I want to take a step back. I have two questions about your time here at Penn State. So first, one of our mission tenets in the Honors College is building a global perspective. And you mentioned you're the daughter of immigrants from Iran, and you also studied abroad at least once in London, which is still a program we offer. How did those experiences contribute to your time here, first at Penn State? How did you navigate that? And then also in your career, how has that influenced you? And obviously you go much more in depth in your book that I have sitting here, but you give us like the 90,000 foot version of that.
I think it just, it flexes your empathy muscles. It really does. You get to see how other people live. I remember coming to campus, and my name is Farnoosh Torabi, and we're in central Pennsylvania. So there were definitely some classmates who were like, what are you? What is this? Who, and I understood that, it's like, well, they haven't left their town ever. So I guess we can't really expect them to have the same level of sort of awareness that I grew up with as an immigrant. And a lot of, people I surrounded myself with were from all different ethnicities, religions, backgrounds, nationalities. So it was really important to me to kind of build upon that, coming to a university that offered study abroad programs, to take advantage of that. I ended up studying abroad in Paris for a semester, and that was always like a non-negotiable for me. I want to do that so that I can, come back to campus, and it made it easier. It made life easier. Penn State's a huge campus, and no matter where you come from, whatever city or big metropolitan area, you went to a high school with 30,000 kids, guess what? There's like 60,000 people here. So it's still like 50, 60?
There's a lot.
A lot, like, I don't know. So it was intimidating, and I think being able to go to London at 19 and learn the tube and be able to navigate a city by myself and a map of a foreign city, and to come here, it's like, oh, I can get to East Halls from wherever I am. I'm good. It just helped me build my confidence, but really also just my appreciation and empathy for people from all different walks of life.
Excellent. And then you mentioned the honors thesis. This is an honors college podcast, so we have to talk about that. You've written several books. You have written probably countless articles and videos, but a major milestone as a writer must have been your honors thesis. Can you tell us about what you researched and how that has impacted your career?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, this thesis comes into play. I'm a senior now, and I've already decided I want to go into journalism school. I want to pursue financial journalism, at least in the beginning. So how can I take advantage of this thesis opportunity to further prove my case and solidify that narrative to graduate admissions boards? So I decided to write my thesis about the relationship between editorial content and advertising content across financial journals and magazines, popular financial journals and magazines. So Forbes, Fortune, at the time there were only, I remember we had magazines back in the day. They're all probably digital now, but the paper I would be at Petit Library, like just getting all these volumes of magazines and going through them and scientifically trying to kind of understand, okay, how are they spacing out the advertisements for the automobiles with the content about cars and the reviews about cars, or the advertisements about investment firms and then the stock picks in the magazine. And so again, that's the climate in the world, like the macro, the global frame of all of this was, again, like the scandals that are happening and the sort of ethics breaches, and I kind of brought that in and sort of in a smaller way. And I think at the end of the day, the conclusion was like, the separation of church and state is not so separate. And, that I think I was very proud of that. I think I wrote about that in my graduate student essays to sort of show that I have been thinking critically about not just how to be a good writer or a good reporter in my field, but somebody who can be objective and somebody who understands the forces of advertising. I mean, these are real forces, and sometimes you have to, it's all in balance. There are real pressures out there to fund a newsroom, to provide funding for journalism. It's important, but that comes at there's relationships with brands and advertisers that you have to sort of toe the line, and I do that now in my career. I work with brands, but we have to create boundaries, and there's a lot of disclosure that has to happen, and so that your audience understands sort of, okay, what's going on here. I understand the relationship between you and this sponsor, or you and this brand, but at the end of the day, you want to convey truth, you want to be trusted. So how do you do that? And it's been a learning journey. I mean, I didn't know this in college or even in the first few years of running my business, but you learn, and I think the thesis sort of gave me the preliminary understanding of this is something that's happening, so kind of look out for it. And I think it impressed the admissions folks. I mean, I got into Columbia and Northwestern and NYU, but picked Columbia because it was the shortest program, and ROI, just get out and start working, making that money, and being in New York was a big draw.
So I wanted to ask, how did you decide that you wanted to go to grad school first thing out of Penn State and not go to a newsroom right away? Right.
Well, it was right after 9/11, and I think I was scared. I think I was scared to put myself out there and try to, to be honest, I was trying to find work I was trying to play both lanes, two lanes at the same time. I was like, well, if I don't get into graduate school, well, what's my backup, right? So I signed parallel to applying to graduate school in the fall of 2001. No, is it 2002? 2001, right? So it was like 9/11 happens, and I'm like, everyone's losing their jobs. The people who had jobs lined up, they're being rescinded. So I wasn't very confident that I could find work in general. But nevertheless, when there were career fairs here, and it may have been from PricewaterhouseCoopers or the banks, I showed up with my business resume, sort of, just in case I couldn't go into the journalism field at that point. But luckily, it worked out. My plan A worked out. I was able to go to journalism school. I got accepted, but I had in my back pocket this idea that if that doesn't happen, I mean, I had that internship at Money my junior year of college. I was probably going to make some phone calls there and say, hey, can you take me? But here's the thing too, daughter of immigrants, Iranian. My parents would have never really supported pursuing a quote unquote creative field in college. But when I told them I got into Columbia to study journalism, they were like, oh, maybe you're good at this. Maybe you can do this. People who are smarter than us and you think you can do this, who are in the field. So let's we support you. And I've heard this from a lot of immigrant kids of immigrants, where they pursued theater, but, only because they went to Yale to pursue theater. It's like there would have been no support if they were like, I'm going to pack up my car after college and drive to Hollywood and cross my fingers and audition. They want you to sort of marry your creative ambitions with some academic credentials.
Well, I think Smeal, Schreyer, Columbia, it's a good combination right there.
Of course, yeah.
So, now, I don't want to spoil too much of your books. I have the most recent one here. I read most of it. It was really good. But can you share some, like, an example of an early win that you've had in your career? And then also, I'm going to call it a learn from your mistakes moment from early in your career, especially for the students in the room who are about to go into internships or their first jobs in the coming months.
I want to start with just giving a really broad tip that if you're ever looking to pursue anything professional in your life, and maybe it requires a pivot, maybe it's like you have a seed of an idea, but you don't really know how to get there, tell people. Don't hold it close to the vest. Don't think that like, oh, it's I'm scared to share this, people will laugh at me, or who's going to care, or why would anybody help me? People want to help, people will listen, and good things will come out of that. That has been such a through line in my narrative. Every time I've been thinking about my next steps and I don't know how to exactly get there, I'll talk to friends, I'll talk to colleagues, I'll talk to people, and not, maybe you got to be strategic about it. Talk to people who, it's like your mom can be, or your parents can be like loving, but are they going to be strategic for you? No, maybe not. So talk to people who have an edge in that world, or have experience or perspective or a network. And when I was out of Columbia, finished my graduate program, I did go back to Money Magazine because it was like sort of the path of least resistance. I'd already worked there. They offered me a gig, and I was like, all right, it's going to keep me warm in New York, paid, and just kind of figuring out my next steps. And I knew it wasn't going to be my forever job, but I took it because, again, it was benefits and all the things. But while I was there, I was like, I really want to get out of here. I don't know how. I really want to work in television. I don't know how. And I remember, talking to my former classmates about it. And one day, a former classmate forwarded me a job opening that I hadn't even come across, and it was like my dream job. It was my absolute dream job at the time, to go to the local New York TV station to run their business news division. So it was at New York. If anyone's from the New York area, it's New York 1, and it would have been a huge step up for me. And I knew it was going to be a learning curve, and I knew, women typically don't apply for jobs unless they feel like they qualify for every single bullet point, whereas men, it's like 50%. So I maybe qualified for 40%, and I still applied. But I really, really went for it. I'm really proud of myself because there were a lot of people who applied. There were a lot of people who were way more experienced than I was, but there were a few things that I did that I think really helped me seal that job. One was I researched who worked there and realized that there was a high up editor there who had visited my university and given a talk at one point that I'd been at, but I kind of forgotten. I didn't remember. So I wrote to him, and not only did he speak at my university, we're from the same hometown. He's from Worcester, I'm from Worcester, Massachusetts. So, just kind of, you got to use all the things, right? So I sent him an email, and not only like buttered him up, but I also talked about why I would be it was basically a cover letter before sending in the resume. And I didn't hear from him, but he apparently did forward that to the news director. And then a week later, I got a call from her office saying, we'd like to interview you. So I knew that had channeled its way to her desk. I've saved that email because it's like wow, if my daughter grows up, I'm going to show her that email. Like, take this email. This is a template. And then I go to the interview and I bring a PowerPoint presentation because I know I'm green and I got to really go the extra mile. And it might have been a little weird, but I came in with decks and we went through it. And in the deck I had, I've been watching the programming. Here's what's great. Here's what I think is working. Here's what I would add. Here's how I could be innovative here. I treat it like a business, as opposed to a creative job. I treat it like you have goals, right? You want to increase viewership. You want to be known as sort of a go-to destination for business news. Here's what I would propose. Now, of course, if we end up doing any of those things, probably not. But it really resonated and it made them remember me. So I got the job, and then about a month or two into the job, I pulled aside the woman who was in the room with the others who I had shown the PowerPoint presentation to? And I said, was it the PowerPoint presentation that did? And they said, actually, that was great. But you know what? You were one of the only, if not the only candidate who did not either pick up her phone during the interview or brag about like who their father was, or just come completely unprepared. So I was like, so it was just, I could have been like so basic and like gotten the job. And you know what, that is still true. LinkedIn just did a survey and found that employers, hiring managers, their biggest pet peeve is that people come in disheveled, late, picking up their phones. So listen, come in with a sharp outfit, be on time, put your phone on silent, you're like 90% there. And this was 25 years ago. It's still true. I can't believe it, but I don't regret having done all of that. But it was, to this day, and actually the woman who wrote my letter as we were applying, I had no idea. For this honor tonight that I'm getting from the Alumni Association, you need a letter of recommendation. And they reached out to this woman who had hired me back at New York One, and like she remembers that. It's like it's become folklore at this point. Like the girl who walked in with her PowerPoint, and the suit was not much. I mean, it was like a $19 suit from Marshall's, but it was like the PowerPoint that really, in the end of the day. And also, I didn't pick up my phone, so.
That's good advice for any situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to read this question verbatim because I'm going to brag on your resume here a little bit as a Schreyer grad and as a Smeal grad. So it's safe to say you were quite used to being on both sides of a conversation like the one we're having right now. First, creating video content at New York One, The Street, and even CNBC at various points. You also produce and host the Webby Award-winning podcast, So Money, as well as the Smeal's Better Business podcast. You can go check that out when you're done watching or listening to this. And you're also what I call a frequent flyer on news and talk channels like CNN, ABC, and countless others. So you could also say that you are an expert in residence with a lot of publications like O Magazine for Oprah. So what strategies have you employed to position yourself as the go-to expert for personal finance, particularly with your emphasis on female empowerment?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. That was, I fact-checked and you were very good at that. And I'm going to use frequent flyer. I like that. I like that a lot.
All yours.
So a few things come to mind. I think firstly, being really easy to work with. I will say that there are a lot of divas in the industry, and I just try to make everyone's life easy. I think having been on all of the sides, I understand when I'm working with someone, collaborating with someone, what they need, and I will anticipate and bring that to the table so that, for example, we're right now, I think I'm going to be on the Today Show on next Friday, and the idea that I initially pitched, they wanted to redo, and the producer said, don't go crazy, you don't have to totally rewrite it, just a couple of things. I said, I'm going to rewrite it, and I'm going to give you graphic ideas, I'm going to give you questions for the anchor, because you're busy producing a live national program, and I really want to be on your show, so I'm going to make it easy for both of us, and a slam dunk. And so I sent her yesterday a completely revised with all of I call it putting it on a silver platter for your people. So that, I may not be the person with the most TikTok followers. I'm definitely not. I'm not the most, I'm successful and I have earned a lot of my merits, but there's always someone who's going to be more quote unquote successful, bigger than you. And the brands, the TVs, the shows, they have a lot of choices. They have a lot of people they can reach out to. But I've been fortunate, they consistently come back to me. First of all, I feel like the world's abundant. There's room for everybody. And there's always room for the person who's remembered as being the one who shows up, the one who delivers well, and she's easy to work with. And we like her. I mean, I like to think that. I can't say I get along with everybody, but I think I leave a good impression. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that I have done, I feel like this is my most important job as a creator, entrepreneur in media, is to create and generate and not to sort of react or sit back and wait for the phone to ring, is that I enterprise, whether that's a new piece of thought leadership, where, for example, my previous book to this one was about women who are primary or earning more in their relationships and their male partners, which was very taboo at the time to talk about, but now we're talking about it. And I like to think that my book kind of helped to turn those squeaky wheels. And so every year it's like, what's going to be the new thing? It could be a new way of sharing the information, like starting a podcast or coming out with a book, or it could be a new thesis, which is, for example, this book of how fear can be an instrument, a tool in helping you find answers to complex issues in your life that you're afraid to tackle. And so that is my advice. I actually coach now others who are looking to build their personal brands, whether that's in finance or health. And that's my big piece of advice, is like, you have to move the needle for yourself. And when you put your work out there, there are positive things on the other side. People don't know what your work, like, how do you, as they say, if you have a great idea and you don't tell anybody about it, you don't share it, like, well, did it even happen? Mm-hmm. Is it really even an idea? So don't be afraid to just put your work out there. And people, for example, who are looking for press and they want to be featured, I said, well, we have all the tools now to be our own press, right? You have social media, you can do a newsletter, you can do a podcast. Like, you don't have to wait to have your own show. That said, there's like the networks that can hire you now, but it happens because you've already kind of shown them what you're capable of. They don't have to guess. And so if you want an audition, well, go, do it. You don't have to wait for the phone to ring. It doesn't happen like that actually anymore. Like I just was reading about my friend who's getting potentially her own, she's a comedian, and she's getting her own show on CBS. Title of her name is the sitcom. And I remember talking to her about it, and she's like, oh, the writers strike this, I don't know if it's gonna happen. She's like, but you know what? I'm gonna just do my own thing. I have a show basically on Instagram and TikTok where I talk about my life all the time on social media. And she has a podcast where now she talks about her life and her family. So this network, it's happening now, because the network's like, oh my gosh, if we don't step in, she's just, so I see this happening all the time, and it's just that entrepreneurial mindset that supersedes any other skill set that you may have acquired.
Excellent. Now, you kind of teed up my next question. So you have your own business, you're managing a team, but you're also the face of the brand, right? Like your brand. And how do you balance those two things? How do you decide what to delegate and what to keep? Which I think, especially for any Sapphire students, any Smeal, Schreyer students, that's probably something that they're trying to navigate as the go-getters.
Yeah. What
recommendations do you have?
So I have a very lean team. You're looking at her. I'm the only W-2 in my company. I used to not be, but you learn quickly. I've learned a lot about myself that I don't like to be delegating and managing. I like to delegate. I have freelancers. I have people that I contract. For example, I don't edit my own podcast. But I love being in it sometimes. Like, I love using Canva and making my decks and creating my social badges and I just love, because again, I think it goes back to the collegiate, making those ads, learning Adobe Illustrator, all the things. So, and it's faster. I feel like I know I could delegate so much more, but then that means also managing people. And I wasn't built for that. Some people love to demonstrate their success by saying, I have 13 interns and 400 people on staff, and God love, that's great, but like, I'm just hearing that and going, HR problems, people coming in all the time with their, concerns, and then can I do the work? Can I actually be in the work? So I never aspired to scale. And I know that's not a sexy thing to say. I aspire to be lean, because I have other things I'm interested in. I have 2 little kids, I have a house, I have family, and I think I'm so grateful that things happen in the timeline that they did in my life, where in my 20s and 30s, at least half my 30s, I could really go 100 miles per hour. But I've invested my money. I've been trying to be really, half year I'm like sort of the person who talks about it. I'll tell you, some of the people don't always do what they say, but I'm benefiting from some of that now, I see everyone else in my world who's like maybe a little bit younger or maybe doesn't have dependents, and they're just like going 1,000 miles per hour and they're getting all these opportunities. And there are times where I'm like, oh, that looks fun. And I'm like, I have to remember that like I chose this, and the grass is always greener, but you have to really like living in the now is really important. And I don't think I did that for a while because I was trying to build and build and build and always looking for the next thing and the next thing. Like this is actually the first time in a very long time where I don't have the next thing yet. You know, I know it'll come, I know it'll happen, and I trust that because I'm 44 and I know that I have a history of being able to make things happen. But I was going for a run yesterday, and I had just learned that like I was potentially up for this TV gig and I didn't get it and someone else did. I was really bummed. I went for a run and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna, if this is really important to me, which I haven't decided yet if it is. I don't know if I was just kind of caught up in the success of being able to brag about that, you know, like sometimes you just want the thing to be like, I got the thing, but then you're like, I got the thing, and now I have to do the thing, and now it's going to be like a lot of time and not even a lot of money. So I thought, you know, if I actually want to pursue that, I know how to do it, I've done it before, and the key is to come up with your own ideas and demonstrate and hustle, which I haven't admittedly done. So that's on me. But if I want to do that, then I'm going to do that. But I have to still figure out if that's really important to me, or if I was just sort of caught up in like the winner-loser-ness of it. But yeah, I'm thinking, I mean, I was on the way up here, I was like, oh my gosh, to like be able to teach, that's something that I've always like maybe wanted to do. To, you know, I don't want to say slow down, but like create your impact in different ways. And I've always been the person, and this was actually a professor at Penn State, it was a theater professor. She's like pulled me aside, she said, you know, you're really creative. Do you want to be in like my summer play? And I said, oh, I can't. I'm interning at Solomon Smith Barney. And she said, okay. But she was the teacher who would say to me, you know, when she would give us a lesson, like something to do in class, like pretend you're, like, you know, do a scene where you're, you know, upset about something. And I would do it. And she'd say, oh my gosh, like every time, like you don't want to do anything that anyone else would potentially do. Like that was not what I saw coming. You know, she knew in me, like there was this rumble of needing to always do something different. So, you know, well, maybe I'll come back next year and I'll tell you what it is.
Well, one of those things that you did have as a next thing that's part of your repertoire now that really stuck out to me from your book is that you kind of took this zig when everyone else zagged approach in terms of online courses and small group workshops. Mm-hmm. So you leaned into small group workshops when a lot of other content creator folks, online courses are sexy, right?
Oh, yeah.
So not to dive into the nitty gritty of those from a content perspective, but more from the business perspective, mm-hmm. How did that jump out to you as like, this is the unmet business need, this is the opportunity that I can latch onto?
Well, so I write about this story in the book in a chapter about FOMO, fear of missing out, and I was in my 30s, had accomplished a good bit, and I looked around and I feel like I kind of missed the internet wave of like, so much of my work was analog, like magazines and of course television, but this internet thing, I had yet to figure out. And I felt like everybody in the thought leadership space was quick to come out with a course this and a course that. And the more so for a while I was like, okay, I need to do this because I'm not legit if I don't have a course. Like, who are you if you don't have a course? And you're leaving money on the table. And so I kind of looked into the mechanics of it all and what it would actually entail. And I'm like, this is not what I like doing. Can I be honest about that? You know, can we discuss how this requires a lot of marketing, behind the scenes, A/B testing, spending a lot of money on Facebook, throwing darts, and it's not really about the education, really it's about the race of trying to get people to sign up and this rat race, and I just thought I had to hire all these people. Ugh. So, but I was like, I sat with the FOMO. You know, when the FOMO comes, it's sometimes a calling to say, okay, something's got you, you have an itch, and you think the mistake we make with the sphere is to assume we have to copy paste the experience that we see before us. Oh, everyone's in Greece, I gotta go to Greece. Everyone's starting a course, I gotta start a course. But it's really deeper. It's really about, there's maybe something in you that's saying, hey, let's start something. let's create something, let's make an impact, let's teach. Those are all the elements that are in the sort of online course world, but it's the mechanics that were not speaking to me. And you can create new mechanics. I mean, there's a market for everything. It's just finding it and making sure it's aligned. I realized that there was such fatigue around online courses that there were people who were willing to pay big money to go in person somewhere in a more intimate setting and learn live from the teacher. So I decided to take my course idea, but make it a workshop and sell it to 10 people instead of 10,000, charge a lot more, but at the end of the day, still do what I wanted, right? Which was to teach, make an impact, and really deliver, and it worked. So I think that we are under the assumption that success equals scale, and I just think it means specificity, like being really specific about what you're trying to accomplish. And I think it was Tim Ferriss who came on my podcast, one of my first guests, who said there's always a market for expensive. There is always a market for people who will pay more if the value is there. It has to make sense, right? Like, and I conveyed the value well enough. And it was a different marketing strategy. There was no A/B testing, Facebook ads. It was networking, going to events, which I like doing. Going to events where I knew the clients were there, having real organic conversations with them. Hey, what do you do? Oh, well, I'm running this workshop, blah, blah, blah. It was about how to write a book and then use the book to become basically a brand. And it was the question that I was getting a lot as I was out and about in the world that had nothing to do with personal finance, but more about like the behind the scenes of my career. So I always say you make money from what you do, and you can make money from what you know. And that was my way of doing that. But no, I didn't do the course. So grateful. I do run an online community now that is part of, like, it's an extension of the audience from the podcast. So if you want more access to me, you want to learn, deep dive on topics every month. I have a whole curriculum, but it's like $29-$39 a month. It's not like a $3,000 thing. But that may change. I don't know. I'm not going to say I'm never going to do a course. And I have done a course for other bigger I did a course for Investopedia. They couldn't sell it. So I'm supposed to sell my own course. Like someone like an Investopedia with marketing teams and advertising teams and budget can't get people to buy a course. I mean, it's a lot of work, and I'm not lazy, but I didn't like that kind of work.
Wasn't the return was not there?
No.
So we've talked a lot about your day jobs, but job number one you've referenced in passing here is being a mom. Like, you're a parent, I can relate to that as a dad. What strategies have you employed, both successfully and unsuccessfully, as a working mom?
Ooh, oh my God, how much time do we have for the unsuccessfully part?
Maybe that's your next book.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, someone's like, you should write a parenting book. I'm like, it's full of questions, there are no answers. This book is going to use the Socratic method. So I would say that I got really good advice before I became a mom from other working moms who said that if you're going to ever sort of take a step back from your career or slow down or reprioritize, or that do it sort of in the middle years, because in the beginning, yes, your babies are vulnerable and they need you, but not as much as you think, because they're not asking you questions yet. They're not dealing with the pressures at school. They're not studying yet. They're not dealing with their emotions yet. They have like two emotions on the roll, right? Happy, sad. So that's, cold, warm. Hungry, yeah. Is that an emotion? And it's like, yeah, they have very basic needs as a child. So I was around, of course, and my husband, but we had full-time care that we invested in. I consider it an investment, not to justify the cost of childcare, but it's like, gonna wrap your head around it, like this will pay off, and it did. It allowed us to continue working in our careers and, taking risks in our careers. To have that stable caregiver full-time was a game changer. I think that was one thing. And now as they're older and in school, this, I can't say, it's been consistent, but this fall I've made a commitment, it's been hard, to just be more around after school, whereas last year I was sending them to an aftercare program. I just feel like particularly our son needs us more right now. He's just, he's 10, he's just, kids are like alive. And so I feel like that's a derivative of the hard work and the investments we've made to be able to get to this place and be like, okay, we're going to transition this and be more present without childcare. We have no childcare, but we can afford it, energetically, financially. So let's make this investment. And the unsuccessful things, I think that I hear this from other parents too, where when your kid's having an issue, and I don't mean like a medical issue or a health issue, but just sort of like there's this expression of like throwing money at the problem. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, oh, well, I can't even give it a good example of this, but maybe it's like, well, they're not that into school, so we're going to send them to the best school. We're going to go to a private school because they're not getting what they need at public school. But maybe it's because it's not the school, it's more the sort of like the kid is not getting the resources at home or outside of school or whatever, or talking to the teachers and really making the investment where you are instead of like completely derailing the school or like assuming the school's the problem. You know what I mean? So like then I hear this from a friend who did this with her son. She sent him to a very, very small private school where there were like 10 people in his grade. And, he's a kid that really doesn't have a lot of friends now. And she realized, like, the trade-off she thought was that he went to this very prestigious school, but unless you're getting along with these 9 kids, who are you going to make friends with, right? And so she fears that maybe she threw money at a problem. It wasn't the academics, though. It was really like, let's focus on the fact that our child is very like outgoing and needs a lot of social stimulation, and this school wasn't the right fit for. Maybe it's prestigious, maybe it's got all the academics, but like actually, he's suffering now because of that. You don't know your kids all that well until maybe in hindsight you're like, oh, that's what they needed. But I don't know. Can you tell? I should not be writing a book about parenting, but
I don't know. You could. I think.
Does this resonate with anyone in the audience?
Getting the questions going, and for the students, this is something to think about down the road if you're considering parent.
I think it's really important to have a village. I mean, when you say you've heard that expression a lot, but the village can be your daycare, but can be it's your family. I mean, I get it now why people move back to where they lived as children to be closer to family. I'm not saying, again, I want to hold the government accountable. I think we have a broken sort of childcare. We don't have a childcare program in this country. We're like the worst when it comes to all like fully developed countries, economically developed countries, that we don't have any guaranteed paid leave on a federal level for parents and caregivers. And I think that it's stupid and it's a cost. It's backfiring. We're not able to retain employees. It's just awful. So I hope that we see change there. In the meantime, as parents, you got to get good at negotiating your own time. You got to get good at outsourcing. And I think for parents who decide to maybe take a step away from their careers, I completely understand that. But if your interest is to go back at some point, to make sure that you're continuing to nurture your profession in some way, whether it's just like continue to connect with former colleagues, staying on top of your industry, doing part-time work, but not abandoning that altogether, because we know the data shows it's very, very difficult to even get back in to what you were doing and to go back in making the previous salary. You kind of have to, start a little bit below. So that's tough, but yeah. I just wrote a baby guide on how to afford a kid in America. It's coming out soon. I'll send it to you and you tell me what you think.
Well, I think you also just found a new episode topic for the Better Business podcast as well to talk about.
Yeah, I'll have a lot more questions than answers.
So speaking of your involvement, you've worked with the Smeal College on that podcast. You, in addition to being a mom, entrepreneur, and creative, you're also a volunteer and donor here at Penn State. You've been on the Schreyer External Advisory Board. You're on the Smeal Board of Visitors. You host the Better Business podcast, and you were even the homecoming Grand Marshal in 2019. Fun. So why is all this service and philanthropy important enough to you to carve out such a precious resource of time to give back to dear old state?
I mean, who doesn't want to come back to Penn State all the time? I mean, I'm selfish, I think. That's why I do it, because it's so much fun. And I think I'm an academic at heart. My parents, always instilled the importance of academia, and then to have experienced Penn State, I think to graduate and to be able to come back, it's a whole new experience. It's, I think, more fun because you have a little bit more money and you can go eat at the tavern if you want and not be worried about the credit card bill. By the way, tavern should raise their prices. It's really still I guess from New York, coming from New York. It's a great value. It's a great value, all those sides. So I feel like I benefited so much, and this is a cliche answer, but it's so true. I benefited so much from being here, and it's just been this experience that keeps on providing me that ROI. And so I am always grateful to come back when I can to help students. I know when I was a student here, to hear faculty or alumni coming back with their experiences was sometimes the best, because you really need that real world perspective to inform what you're going to do when you leave here, and then also what you're going to do while you're here to make the most impact for yourself. So it's a no-brainer.
Excellent. Well, as a development and alumni relations staff member here, I love hearing that. I'm sure my colleagues in the room do too. So we're going to wrap up here. We are well into long-form content area here. How can scholars who are here or watching the video, listening afterwards, how can they get in touch with you?
Oh yeah, so
or really any Penn State student.
Well, you can. I'm on Instagram a lot. You can DM me there. It's like my text at this point. And then every Friday, if you have a question about money or career, every Friday I take questions from the audience, and that becomes the show. So I have a 3-day-a-week show, but Friday is just for the audience to answer their questions, and you can send me those questions by clicking a button on the So Many Podcast website called Ask Farnoosh. It's on the right-hand corner. And you can email me, farnoosh@somanypodcast.com. I feel like I'm on the show. Leave a review, send it to a friend. Yeah.
Well, I'm about to get to that, but I have one more critical question here, and a tradition on Following the Gong. Farnoosh, if you were a flavor of Berkey Creamery ice cream as we sit a stone's throw away from their facility, which would you be? And as a Scholar alum, why would you be that flavor?
I did not prepare this answer, and I feel like I like the mint chocolate chip one. What's that called?
Bittersweet mint?
Sure, that one.
Why would you be that flavor?
Because it's both sweet and tart, and as I said earlier, I like multiple flavors, and I like the color, and it's just what I've always liked as a kid. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Farnoosh, for joining us, and thank you to the audience as well. Before I let you share a last piece of advice as we wrap up, if you're watching the video version, like you said, make sure subscribe, like all that stuff, and same on the audio if you're listening, engaging with us on Apple, Spotify, etc. Now, once you're done that, then make sure you go check out some of her other content. You've mentioned So Money, the Smeal Better Business podcast, and others. So with that, before we head off to the Alumni Fellow ceremony later today, why don't you close this out with a final piece of advice as one of our Alumni Fellows?
Ooh, don't get too comfortable. I like a good comfort zone. But when you get a little too comfortable or a lot too comfortable, I think it's where the spark goes away a little bit. And I think having an appetite for innovation, it only comes when you feel like that rumble and you get a little maybe tired of the same old. It's important, to feel constantly inspired, maybe not 24/7, but find your sources of inspiration, latch onto them, find new ones if you have to, because your ideas aren't going to just show up. You need to go out there and live and try new things and do it scared, so don't get too comfortable.